The past decade has been terrible for children in humanitarian crises around the globe. The worst, in fact, since UNICEF has been keeping track. As we start a new decade, what can be done to improve the situation, both globally and here at home? Let's find out from David Morley. He is the president of UNICEF Canada. Lindsay Groves, vice president for global partnerships at the nonprofit organization Right to Play. Dr. Anna Banerjee, continuing professional development lead for Indigenous and Refugee health at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto, and Kim Snow, associate professor at Ryerson University's School of Child and Youth Care in the Faculty of Community Services. And we are happy to welcome all of you for a very sobering discussion here at TVO tonight. And we want to start by just, Sheldon, if you would, bringing up this graphic here. And for those listening on podcast, I will read this out in some detail as we discuss the 59 million children in crisis situations across the globe. And here are some examples. Yemen is the worst global humanitarian crisis, with 11 million children facing food shortages, disease, and displacement. Of course, they've had a horrible civil war there for years. Because of the war in Syria, there are 2.6 million children displaced inside that country, and another 2.5 million refugee children outside in places like Turkey and Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. In Afghanistan, more than 5 million children need humanitarian and protection assistance. Venezuela's socioeconomic and political crisis has led to 1.9 million children needing assistance there and across Latin America and the Caribbean. And let's do one more. In the African countries of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, 721,000 children under the age of 5 are severely malnourished, and another 610,000 are affected by school closures due to violence. David, this is an appalling portrait of the state of many children in our world today. Give us a sense, since you track this stuff, give us a sense about what these children are contending with.
Well, it's hard for us here at home to imagine, Steve, but what we find is they've lost their homes. So first of all, think about children who've had to leave their homes. Maybe they've lost their parents. They've lost their schools because we're finding that schools are getting attacked more and more. The rules of war are not being respected. They've lost their chance for health care, and that's why we're having to come in with emergency services for so many. That's the physical side, and then there's the trauma that those children are facing. What's it mean? You know, children in Syria who, if you were 2 years old when the war started and you're 11 now, think of that as your childhood. You've known nothing but this conflict, and your parents upset, if your parents hopefully are still living. It's hard for us to imagine what it means to each and every one of those children.
Anna, there was a widely distributed, widely read, I think, column by Nick Kristof in the New York Times I guess a couple of weeks ago, in which he said, this is the best year ever in human history. Things are better than they've ever been. And yet, things for kids seem to be getting so much worse. How come?
Well, as you said, there's unprecedented amounts of violence and displacement. I believe that we have more displaced people now than we ever have had in human history. I think part of what's happening is we've had wars, but the wars are not respecting the Geneva Conventions. And schools, education systems, hospitals, healthcare providers are being bombed. They're using chemical weapons, like, for example, in Syria. And the world really hasn't done much about it. But also there are other issues like climate change, things affecting the basic needs, food, water, shelter, safety, all those kinds of things that are occurring around the world that impacts child health.
How about here at home? What would you add to that? I mean, that's certainly a very devastating look at the way things are around the world. What would you add to that list about how things are here at home?
I mean, I think as a result of the legacy of colonization and residential school systems in Canada, we see that our Indigenous children and youth and Indigenous communities continue to face extreme inequality in Canada. Indigenous youth, about 70% will not graduate high school. If you can imagine that, on reserve, 70% of youth not graduating high school. If you look at our foster care system, 50% of children in the foster care system are Indigenous, though only about 7.5% of children in Canada are Indigenous. You're talking about extreme inequality in Canada as well.
In fact, we rank apparently 25th out of 41 wealthy countries across 9 Sustainable Development Goals pertaining to children and youth well-being. And let's look at some of these in detail. And again, Sheldon, if you would, thanks, bring up that graphic. Why are we only in 25th out of 41? Well, 1 in 5 children live in relative poverty in this country. 25% of children have experienced violence at home before the age of 15. 1 in 4 sometimes go to bed or school hungry. 27% are often bullied, 28% get into fights, and only 1 in 5 to 11-year-olds get 90 minutes or more of daily playtime. I should ask the representative of Right to Play. Why is that the situation here?
I mean, I think ultimately sometimes we're looking at what children need to survive and not what children need to thrive. And we have to start looking at more than just the necessities of life. Yes, we need food, water, shelter for all of our children, whether in Canada or globally. But in order for children to fundamentally grow, develop, thrive, and reach their full potential, they need more. And that's where at Right to Play, we look at the whole child, and we look at what the whole child needs, which includes all of these social, emotional, cognitive competencies that play can really fundamentally develop so that they can secure their own future.
Kim, what would you add to the list of why Canada seems to be doing so badly on that list?
Well, I look at specific populations, right? So are all Canadian kids doing that poorly? And in fact, I'd argue some are doing much more poorly. So how are our young kids in care doing? Well, we know that, for example, last year the chief coroner released a report on the death of 12 young people in the care of the Children's Aid Societies. 11 of those young people were Indigenous. It's not surprising that some groups of kids are doing much worse. When we go up on Fly-In Reserve, we see that, like you see, that the numbers of high school graduation rates are so much lower. And this is structural. There's such inequity for those kids up north. Whether it's, we're talking basic needs of food, clothing, water, adequate shelter, because of the housing crisis up there, but then play, opportunities for hope in the future, capacity building within the community so that when we have a mental health crisis, they're not being put on a plane and sent down south. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at last week in the city of Toronto, we had a mental health crisis as a result of worldwide news and no room in the system to move them. We have a generation of anxious young kids and very little ways to support them. And those are the average kids. Those kids who are in care, those kids who are experiencing extreme poverty, the newcomers to our city, we're not able to provide the mental health supports for them.
And just take a moment and explain why kicking a soccer ball or playing hockey or tossing a baseball can have such restorative effects on kids.
And I think play is fundamentally the language of how children engage and make sense in the world. I see it with my 2-year-old son every day, how he's learning, how he's growing. It's through play. And we see it with many of our Indigenous communities and our work across 15 countries globally. But different forms of play, sport, games, art, drama, theater, music, they're platforms through which children can engage and express themselves, develop relationships with their peers, healthy relationships. And it's also a fundamental learning tool because the reality is that children can learn through play better, quicker, faster, and more meaningfully than through other methods.
If I might just add,
please.
We also can treat mental health through play, right? So young people and adults benefit on a vasovagal level.
On a which what?
On the vagus nerve, okay, vasovagal. So essentially, our reptilian brain, our fight, flight, freeze response, is very responsive to rhythm, repetition, play, right?
Gotcha.
Adults and young people could benefit.
David, what determines well-being among children?
Well, when we talk to young people in Canada and around the world, one of the, there's the hierarchy of needs, and as you start to get into well-being, of course you have to meet those basic needs of nutrition and schooling, but then it's security. There's a sense of security. Because if a child is not feeling secure, how can they grow? Well, for any of us, frankly, but I think it's even more for children. It's that sense of how do you thrive? And one of the things that we've found in our discussion with young people in Canada is that sense of belonging. Do they belong
that's
to our society or not? Do they? And we hear it, you know, the same in many, many different societies and different economic levels. You have to feel that you belong. You have to feel well-being is having a sense of hope as well. And I think things like the climate crisis, if young people are not able to be able to steer the future of societies, be involved in that, then you start to feel hopeless. And I think what we're seeing is children taking action. We've seen children taking action here in Ontario about the school system. We've seen children taking action around the world about the climate crisis. I'm very hopeful, and at UNICEF we're doing a lot of work with youth activists to help them name the things that are important to them, and so they can take charge, and then they start to lead one another. That's a way to get well-being. You've got control over your life.
Anna, you're dealing with refugee kids every day, right, in your work? How do you gauge their level of well-being?
I screen them, so I only see them for a certain period of time. A lot of these kids are very traumatized. Almost all of them are. And for a lot of them, what they need is stability in their lives. They need to have a place to live, to call their home, because many of them have not had that. They need the shelter and the food, things like that. Most of them are malnourished, but they need, what they want the most is to go to school. They want to go to school, be normal, have a normal life, engage with other people, make friends. But security, safety, living in a place where they're not going to be persecuted.
You've worked in refugee zones, you've been all over the world and seen these places. When a child lives in a war zone or grows up in a refugee camp, for example, what does that do to their psyche long term?
How can you feel secure if you don't know from one day to the next if your parents are going to be there? There's the trauma, there's the ongoing trauma. And some of that starts to affect the way our brains develop, right? So much trauma that can happen and it affects the plasticity of the brain in a young child and makes it harder for them as they get older, for building relationship, for being able to overcome that. It can be overcome. Like it doesn't mean nothing good will ever happen to children. But it's a lot of work for all of us and for the young people themselves to overcome that. They can do it.
Yeah.
Kim, you want to add to that?
There's not much to add to that. It profoundly impacts on the development of children.
But it's not permanent necessarily.
It's not permanent, but in the short term, it's impacting on their learning and their language. And that will impact on their progress in school. And belonging is so key. We see that with kids in care, right? When they're shipped around the province, they feel lost and adrift. It's very hard to ground yourself and focus on school, for example.
Well, let me pick up on that with David. All those kids, we talked about the millions of kids right now, who originally from Syria are now finding themselves in neighboring countries, obviously far away from home and in desperate circumstances. What do they do for school?
Well, in some of the countries, we at UNICEF are working with local ministries of education to try and increase the amount of school capacity that's there. Turkey, for instance, has had to deal with this incredible influx. They've taken the most children. And they have a question. Do you teach them in Turkish or do you teach them in Arabic? Because are they going to stay or are they going to go back home? And that's whenever there's a different language issue for refugees, that's a huge political issue. Because,
and what's the answer to that question?
Well, for instance, if you've come as far as Canada, you're going to teach people in English or French, right? Because that's what it is. The Turkish school system has decided to make space in Arabic because they're hoping for peace, because everybody you talk to, I've been in refugee camps talking with parents and children. They want to go home.
Yeah.
They want to go home. And you can say to them, but you know, your home, I try not to say in this way, but your home's being destroyed. And they know it. Yeah. But they still want to go home, and it's their heart. Yeah. It's their heart, and they want to go back in time. They'll want to go home, and they want to rebuild. Yeah.
Lindsay, how much is right to play in a lot of these neighboring countries around Syria, and what impact can they have there?
Right to Play Works has been responding to the Syrian crisis and also working with Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestinian refugees in the West Bank and Gaza. And I think, building on your point, David, one of the things that we've really seen and what's unique about the current crisis is that the length of displacement now is very different than what it was 20, 30 years ago. In the 90s, the average length of displacement was about 9 years. Now it's 20. So that means that, a child born today will spend their entire life in displacement. I was in Jordan and Lebanon earlier this year, and we met kids that they don't know Syria. They are born in Jordan. They were born in Lebanon trying to make a life. But we know that it's also incredibly challenging what they're facing in these host countries. We did a study a couple of years ago with the International Institute for Child Rights and Development that was looking at the effects of psychosocial effects and how play can support. And one of the most profoundly shocking pieces that I learned from the study was that the children we engaged with actually found that their life in their host country, in this case Lebanon, was more traumatic than their actual experience of seeing family members killed and fleeing Syria. Because of the social isolation, the lack of access to some fundamental rights around lack of education, healthcare, seeing their parents not have a right to work, a right to own property, and not knowing when they can return. So that's where, coming back, I think, to your points earlier, Kim, around thinking about the type of psychosocial support that they need so that these kids can be resilient, so that when we're talking about an entire generation potentially spent in displacement, when they do go home, which is our hope, that they are strong and resilient and capable of really transforming their community.
Well, let me pick up on that with you, Anna, because 10 years ago this very week, I know where you were. Yeah. I know what the world's attention was focused on. Yeah. There was a massive earthquake in Haiti. Yes. You went there.
Yes.
Let's talk about that generation of kids and how they've done over the ensuing 10 years. Any idea?
I haven't been there since the earthquake when I went down with the Red Cross, but I hear that very little has changed in Haiti. There's not a lot of education, health infrastructure, infrastructure as far as roads, sanitation. So I think you had the country that had the lowest indicators in the Western world knocked down several levels, and I think it's a very difficult place to be.
This was already the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere,
yes. Yeah.
And things obviously got a whole lot worse.
Yes.
How about infectious diseases? Any sense about what that's doing?
I haven't heard anything recently about the outbreaks, but I was there before the cholera outbreaks, and it was clear that it was going to happen. There was no safe water. People were drinking water from rivers, sewers. It was awful. It was very predictable, and I think there's a certain baseline of infectious disease that's going on there, diarrhea, malaria, measles, etc. I think the vaccination levels are very poor, but that's become the new low level of standard. And then every now and then you can hear of more outbreaks, but it's that poverty-driven and the lack of infrastructure-driven that ends up being infectious disease.
Yeah. David, this was a country that was already having huge issues with governance and logistics and organization and so on. What can you tell us about whether or not they've made any progress in the last 10 years?
It continues, because sometimes when we're talking about humanitarian response, we always say in our humanitarian part of our work, there's no humanitarian solution to a humanitarian crisis. Right. It's a political solution that's needed. What Haiti had before, the situation was terrible. When things like the tent cities were created, sometimes what was happening, I was there a few years after, there were still tent cities because people didn't want to leave, because the tent cities were better than where they had come from in Port-au-Prince. So there was better lighting, there was better security. So until we solve, and it's not up to us to solve, it's up to the Haitian people to solve the crisis of governance, alas, this is going to keep on happening.
They have not had much luck at that over the last 200 years. So
No.
Is there any good news anywhere to report there?
I think when you work at the community level, you see such fantastic stuff. Some of the young people that I've seen, that I've got to know, but I've met a few times over the years, watching them, right? It's kind of like we're here, you know, and we're all foreigners from a country like Haiti, so we can go, whoa, this is too much. The Haitian community leaders, they're living in this area, and they're creative. They think of ways to try and make the children and young people who are excluded, to bring them in, to give them a sense of community. Those are the heroes. It's not only in Haiti, but in, you know, Venezuela, in Yemen. It's those local leaders. It's our privilege to get to be able to support them a little.
Yeah.
Kim, let me get you to bring us back to the province of Ontario, because I know you do work with Indigenous kids, you do work with kids in the north, here in the provincial capital as well.
Yep.
What is the reality of life like for many Indigenous children in this province?
Well, I mean, it varies, of course, community to community, but some of our fly-in reserves, as an example, are faced with lack of basic needs. So you're looking at food, clothing, water, housing, right? Housing shortages. On top of that, you have suicide epidemic that we saw unfold again over this last winter break of very young children.
How young?
I think they're young as 11.
Killing themselves.
Yes. Right? And how as society are we allowing this to happen without outrage? And this is just the past month, right? If we go back year after year after year, we can go back decades of a suicide epidemic. And then we have them picked up and brought into child welfare, and very often brought south. So think about coming from Hudson Bay and being placed in a residential program in Peterborough, right?
Quite a culture shock.
It's quite a culture shock. And are we prepared to welcome them? And when we talk about belonging, how do you have that core need? And I think it's a basic need to belong. How do you have that core need of belonging when you don't have your family and kin around? And then what's most important for me is who's safeguarding that child? Whose eyes are on that child to make sure they're safe down in Peterborough? Because I know that up on a reserve, you're going to have an auntie, you might have a storekeep, you might have a teacher, you might have a maintenance person who knows this young person, and they have a relationship and they're watching out for them. When they're a stranger down south, that's what they feel. They feel, I don't belong. They experience racism and disconnect from their family.
Let's put this in a context, a more historical context. People are now aware of the ravages of the residential school situation in the past history of this country. If you were to compare the number of kids in care today to the number of kids who suffered as a result of the residential school system, what's the comparison?
Well, Cindy Blackstock tells us there's more kids in residential care today than there were at the height of the residential school system.
That's shocking.
It's tragic. We have to turn the tide. And we keep, in different ways, doing the same thing over and over again. We need to help Indigenous communities develop their own self-governance of children's services. And when that happens, we will change our legacy of removing kids into child welfare.
If I can
Please.
just add, because I agree that we at UNICEF have worked with Cindy very closely to help try and get that self-governance. But there is also money. In the last election campaign, UNICEF was advocating for equitable funding for child welfare, for education, and for health,
recreation,
and on reserve,
which the courts have ordered, and yet still has not happened.
Right.
And you need different panelists than us probably to answer that one. It hasn't happened, but it's also all of us as a society, as you say, Kim. Why are we not outraged as a society? Because I think that will be a way that we perhaps start to make amends and do our part to make sure there's enough money and the Indigenous people will be able to help themselves.
Anna, I'd like to ask you about the work that you do with kids in Inuit communities. How long have you been doing that?
For 25 years, I've been doing research in the Inuit communities.
25 years. What kinds of illnesses are they dealing with that you might not see in the rest of the country?
Well, they have disproportionate rates of respiratory syncytial virus, and Inuit babies have the highest rates of RSV in the world. As far as other infections, they are overrepresented for many other infections, and there are high rates of tuberculosis as well in many of these communities.
Can I have a bit of a hard conversation with you right now?
Sure.
Nathan.
Yes, okay.
Talk to us about Nathan. How did he come into your life?
Well, I was doing research in the Arctic for about, at that time, like 8-9 years, and I was speaking to an elder, and she told me that they needed people to adopt or for foster care in these communities because there really weren't enough supports. And many years later, a child was born and needed a place to go. And this elder said, Dr. Anna always said she would adopt an Inuit child. And so I ended up adopting Nathan.
How old was he at the time?
4 months.
Was he healthy?
I thought he was healthy.
But?
He was very irritable in the first year of his life, and then he calmed down. He was just a very gentle, kind, sweet baby.
And where was he from originally?
From Clyde River, Nunavut.
Nunavut, okay.
Yes.
And you brought him to live with you where?
In Toronto.
In Toronto?
Yes.
Now, at 4 months old, that should be a transition that should be fairly manageable, yes?
He was very irritable in the first year of life. And now I understand why more than I did before.
Go ahead, tell us.
Well, Nathan died last year. And he took his life just like at the age of 14, just like his brother, who also committed suicide at the age of 14. And it was really, I suspected that he had fetal alcohol syndrome for a couple of years, but it was only at his visitation, as things were ending, it was 9 o'clock, I was standing around looking at pictures, and I saw a baby picture of him, and I said, oh my God, that baby has fetal alcohol syndrome, which is what I suspected as well for a while. But then it was funny, I'm a pediatrician, I confirmed it by seeing his picture at that point in time. But there were a lot of issues, as far as Indigenous populations and suicide, things that we've talked about already. It's a lack of validation. It's a lack of the basic needs. In Nathan's brother's community, or in the north, there's overcrowding. There's not equitable access to food. There's, they don't have good education. If you don't live in a place where, like in First Nations communities, where you have access to clean water, what are we telling them? We're telling them that you're not valued, you're not important. And if you don't have equitable access to things like education, foster care, again, we're telling them that you're not important, your lives don't matter. And so, having people fly in when there's epidemics, these crises going on, those are Band-Aid solutions. We need to start back and go back to equity. We need to treat Indigenous people the same as us. It should be illegal for people to live in substandard housing. The housing standards should be the same across the country. It should be criminal that children don't have enough food to eat. In Nunavut, 70% of preschool children don't have enough food to eat. That should be, we should have in communities, Indigenous or non-Indigenous communities, breakfast programs so that every child has breakfast. And we need to prioritize a national food strategy so that every child, especially in the Indigenous communities where they don't have access to food, that they have, there's a strategy in place so that children aren't starving. So it's these basic needs that we're not meeting. And if you start addressing that and having these communities have equity, then you're going to reduce some of the suicide as well. You're going to tell people that they matter. Yes. And you're going to empower them as well.
I gather, Dr. Anna, some of your med school friends are doing something special in Nathan's memory?
Yes. So on I hate to age myself, but my 30th medical school reunion, people are asking me about my time in the Arctic, and I told them about my research. I've been doing research on respiratory syncytial virus for the past almost 25 years, and I talked to them about my time in the Arctic, adopting Nathan, my research, back to Nathan's brother dying, my research back to Nathan dying, and I told them about the health disparities, and I said that we have a voice, that we can all do something. We need to, all of us need to strive for human rights and equity. And one of my classmates took that to heart. She said she couldn't sleep at night, and she read all my papers and all the papers related to that. In the morning, she started a petition on change.org, and change.org/fair medicine. And she said, we can do something and try to get Inuit babies So basically, Inuit babies have the highest rate of admission for RSV in the world. They're in these small communities. They need to get, when they get sick with RSV, they get medevaced in these communities.
RSV meaning?
Respiratory syncytial virus. It's like influenza, but it tends to occur in babies less than 1 year of age. And so in these small communities, they get RSV. Most of these communities have nursing stations. They don't have the capacity to take care of these babies. So they get medevaced from the hospitals from the nursing stations in the communities to regional hospitals, and a significant amount of them end up in the ICU in southern hospitals and southern children's hospitals across Canada. And these are babies in Nunavut and Nunavik. And it's very, very expensive for these medevacs. And so we've done a series of papers which showed that there's an antibody called pelavizumab. If you give this pelavizumab, the cost of giving this to all the term babies in these rural areas is much, much, much cheaper than medevacing them down, putting them in the ICU. And we didn't even calculate the cost of the complications, but some of these babies have long-term complications. So we did this. She started the petition, and we've had some media involvement. We've had support from Ontario Medical Association, Canadian Medical Association, Canadian Public Health Association, people like Bob Ray, David Suzuki wrote an op-ed about it last week, Bernie Farber. So we have now 84,000 signatures, and I'm going to Ottawa on Monday to meet with the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Indigenous Services, also the Deputy Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nunavut, some researchers in Nunavik, and we're going to try to come to some kind of agreement. But this is the kind of thing. We should get angry. We should get upset. We should all be saying, it's not okay to have mercury toxicity in grassy narrows anymore. It's not okay not to have access to clean water. Like every single one of us. If you care about human rights, we need to stand up for it.
Thank you for that. I know that was hard, but I thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Kim, a couple of minutes to go here. I want to ask you about the Voyageur project that you're involved with. Tell me about that.
Voyageur Project's a program that's really dear to my heart. These are young people who are in care. We, by and large, meet them in grades 7, 8, or 9. And for the past 14 years, they've been coming on campus at Ryerson to reach out to other kids in care, in group and foster care, encourage them to go to school. And that might start with and it all starts with an education plan with me. That might mean maybe they'll learn to use Microsoft products to start. But that's enough, that's a start. And over the past 14 years, we have about 300 young people who grow up in care, and the rates for kids growing up in care for graduation is about 46%. We don't have good stats, but it's abysmal. And the Voyageur Project are young people themselves, again, young people leading the way, reaching out to other young people and encouraging them to go to post-secondary education. So they go into the trades, they go to college, they go to university, and now 14 years later, we have generations of young people who are coming back. Next Saturday, in fact, they'll be leading an activity with other young kids in care to come on campus to say, there's possibilities for you. The future doesn't matter whether you graduate from high school or not. You can go from care to education in any shape or form of that, and it will help you with this transition. It's a program that is breaking the cycle of poverty by showing opportunities, led by people who've been there.
David, let me give you the last word here. We know that there are sustainable development goals towards the year 2030 that the world is supposed to be focused on and making decisions today to help us achieve 10 years hence. Are we on pace to make that happen?
We're not on pace to make that happen. I think we've been allowing too much to go. But we have to remember that in this past generation, things have got better. We're at a point in the world now where fewer children under 5 are dying than ever before, where more children are going to school than ever before, when fewer mums are dying in childbirth than ever before. It's not good enough, clearly. We need to do more. But my goodness me, over these last 30 years, where there's peace, you can build hope. And that's why working for peace is also key to hitting these goals.
David Morley from UNICEF, Anna Banerjee from University of Toronto, Kim Snow from Ryerson University, Lindsay Groves, Right to Play. Good of all of you to come into TVO tonight and help us out with this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.